Hello, everybody, and a happy Sunday morning to everybody. My name's Hans Heiser. Next to me, this is the All-American punter, Drew Butler, former Georgia Bulldog. Good to see you, bro.
Glad to be here. Another exciting weekend of SEC football to cover today, so thanks for inviting me.
What's keeping you busy these days, man? Doing some podcasts with Mr. Murray, I hear?
That's right. We got the Punt and Pass podcast out on iTunes, TuneIn Radio. Get it anywhere, but we having a lot of fun. Aaron Murray, my former teammate at Georgia, and we cover SEC football, talk a lot about life. Bring on a guest every week, just have a lot of fun. So if you have some time on your hands, be sure to check that out, the Punt and Pass podcast.
Well, it's good for you to be here today. And this is the Texas Pete scoreboard show and a busy day of college football, week 6. And we'll get heavy into the SEC action. Don't forget, you guys hit us up on our live Facebook page. You can interact with myself and Drew throughout the show. We'll be with you for the next hour. We'll get to the SEC. But Drew, yesterday, a couple upsets there in the top 10. And as far as the big picture goes, is we're getting. It's hard to believe we're halfway done with the season, but you got Michigan going down yesterday, their in-state rival to Michigan State, and of course the big one that shocked everybody, Oklahoma may be looking ahead to the Red River Shootout next week. They fall at home to Iowa State of all teams.
Yeah, exactly. You know, 2 huge upsets within the top 10 yesterday. You mentioned we're halfway through the season, and what's crazy is up to this point, that Heisman watch is very, very jumbled up with Baker Mayfield going down yesterday. No clear-cut front runner. It was very, very interesting to see Oklahoma lose to Iowa State, even as a double-digit favorite.
Yeah, in Notre Dame, they continue to win. I think this is important for Georgia fans because what looked like early in the season is just another ho-hum win. It turned out to be a couple things for the Dogs. It was a huge confidence boost for a young team, a freshman quarterback. And it turns out Notre Dame's actually a pretty good football team. So as they continue to win these big games, they take care of North Carolina yesterday. You got to think that's going to help Georgia as far as the extra points in the weekly polls.
Yeah, no question. You know, maybe that Notre Dame victory early in the season was considered a throwaway, but not only is Notre Dame winning games now, they're putting up a lot of points. Georgia held them to 19 points. That just goes to show that Georgia's defense is in fact proven, and they have what it takes to make a championship run. There's no question.
And this is the Texas Pete Scoreboard, Texas Pete drama for your mouth. And folks already hit us up here on our Facebook page. Jeff Synth just writes in, he said, it was close in College Station yesterday, but Alabama finds a way to get it done, and that's where we'll start. And last night, no surprise, Alabama gets the win, but there's a lot of different things to look at with this football game. For me, I think it's more on the A&M side, the fact that people have been talking about Kevin Sumlin. Is this going to be his last year? Is he on the hot seat? Is his team going to compete? I got to tell you, man, this was an impressive football game played from start to finish by offensively their freshman quarterback and their playmakers. But even more so, what stuck out to me was defensively how they really limited Alabama's running game after that 75-yard touchdown run from Damian Harris on the first play from the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, if you give Alabama a chance to make chunk yard plays like Damian Harris did with that 75-yard touchdown run, you're going to be behind the sticks early. But it was impressive to see Texas A&M hang in throughout the game. Obviously, College Station is a tough place to play. I was just glad to have something to watch in the fourth quarter when Bama was on TV.
Right, for a change. You mentioned the Heisman Trophy there for a minute. You mentioned Baker Mayfield, of course, Penn State's running back, but a guy who, you know, he doesn't put up statistically the numbers, maybe even that he did last year because he's got so much help at tailback behind him. But Jalen Hurts is a guy who just continues to make plays, win football games. I would not be surprised. I don't say if he wins it, but if Alabama continues to dominate and win games, which we all expect they will, at the end of the year, if Jalen Hurts is not only in New York City, but if he's one of the front runners for the trophy.
Yeah, you would think with what he's done the past 2 seasons at Alabama, throw away all the talent that he has around him. This guy manages football games like a championship quarterback. He puts his team in the right position. He converts on third downs. He makes plays with his feet. You would think Jalen Hurts is certainly jockeying for an invite to New York for that Heisman Trophy ceremony, and it's been extremely impressive. I'll never understand, and I still don't get it, why Alabama fans continuously kind of downplay what the success that he's had as a true freshman last year going into his true sophomore year. He wins football games, and he does not turn the ball over, which helps you win a lot of football games.
And speaking of turnovers, that turned out to be the difference in the game yesterday. 3 turnovers for Texas A&M. A big interception there thrown by Kellen Mond at the end where they had a chance to make it a one-possession game, but he's a freshman. He's going to make those mistakes from time to time. But I will say this from the young man. He looked good. He looked poised. He had some moments. He made a couple freshman mistakes. But, I mean, this guy wasn't supposed to be thrown into the fire this way this year. But he's a guy who's continued to get better, and he's got the intangibles. He seems like a leader. The guys really seem to respond to him when he's in the huddle.
Yeah, there's no question. Mund has a lot of moxie. He plays kind of with that Johnny Manziel swagger that Texas A&M is used to. But if you break down and turn the ball over against a team like Alabama, it's going to be tough sledding from there. We have the statistic here, Hans. It's absolutely insane. Alabama committed their first turnover in 37 quarters. That leaves them plus 21 in the turnover margin through 6 games. That's unheard of. And I felt bad for the wide receiver. His name just slipped me. For number 1 for Alabama, right. Fumbled the ball. ESPN showed him on camera for probably 5 minutes like he had committed a serious crime. Give the kid a break.
But you know why he was on camera? Because the producers said, keep your eye on camera because what's going to happen when he goes to the sidelines?
Yes.
They wanted to see that interaction between Nick Saban and him for creating the first turnover in 37 weeks, but I think Saban handled it perfectly. You know, I mean, he was a little stern with him. Not that I'm being, analyzing Nick Saban, how he handles his players, but, he wasn't over the top.
Yeah,
I think it was a lesson learned there for the young man.
I mean, it's like if you sit down at the blackjack table and you win 17 hands in a row,
right.
The dealer's going to get blackjack at some point, or you're going to bust out at some point. So take it and just move on. And obviously, if you're plus 21 on the season, a little to complain about.
Well, on the Texas A&M side of things, after they let the UCLA game get away from them, which was just epic. It was an epic collapse. People were calling for Kevin Sumlin's head at that point. What kind of season was it going to be for them? I don't want to say they've righted the ship, but they've continued to get better as a football team. This is a big test for them. There's a lot of football left on their schedule. Drew, my question to you is, there seems to be some scientific data in years past for Kevin Sumlin and Texas A&M called the Alabama effect.
Yes.
And it's what happens to his team after they play Alabama the rest of the year that has had people calling for his job. Do you see this being a trend that continues this year, or do you think this team might be a little bit different?
It seems like the team's different because I would just go back to Kellen Mond, their freshman quarterback. This kid is a playmaker. He extends the play. If he does not turn the ball over, Texas A&M will certainly have a chance to continue to right the ship throughout the rest of the season. So I know a lot of people will be watching that, but it just goes to speak of the cutthroat nature of college football. Now, I mean, Kevin Sumlin, they lost the UCLA game early in the season, like you said, in very dramatic fashion. They just said, fire him. I mean, that's what college football is now. It was the first game of the season. Now we're in week 6. They take Alabama to the fourth quarter. I think Kevin Sumlin is safe for now.
I do want to mention, people are hitting us up on our Facebook page here, and we encourage you to do so. We'll interact with you throughout the show, that we have the wrong score up there. And in fact, we do have the wrong score up there, and for that I apologize, and you will be severely punished behind the glass for that. It was 27-19. It was
like Kevin Sumlin.
Right. It was a one-possession game, so I think, the line in this game was 27 points. That's asking a lot on the road at College Station with the 12th man and all that.
It is, but if you're a gambling man and you bet against Bama, you're usually proven wrong. Last night was the exception. Texas A&M played very, very well, and I'm sure that Nick Saban had a few choice words for his players after they didn't cover.
No, real quick, before we move on to the next game, and we're going to talk a lot about LSU and Florida, I want to get your take on a play in that game, special teams play involving Alabama's All-American punter. He wanted to kick it away from Kirk, right? And rightfully so. He's one of the most dynamic playmakers in college football. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. It was an angle kick. That's a call that comes from the head coach that he missed. Just tell me about that play, what you saw, and maybe how it should have been handled differently.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings, and I wish I could speak directly to J.K. Scott, but coming into the season and based off of his resume the past 3 seasons, J.K. Scott is one of the premier punters in the country. His resume speaks for itself. I feel like he's being spread a bit too thin right now. He's out there for long-range field goals. He's holding, which he should do on extra point and field goal attempts, and he's kicking off. Now, JK, you are one of the best punters in the country. Do what you do. You have 5- and 4-star athletes all on your punt team. When the coach is telling you to kick it away from Kirk, look at your coach and say, I'll hang this thing up with 5+ seconds of hang time. I can trust the playmakers around me to go down there and force a fair catch. I'm not sure why Alabama is scared of any return man. And J.K. Scott, go back to your bread and butter, man. Catch it and kick it. You're a stud. I know he will be able to bounce back, but it's unfortunate to see. I feel like you can see him trying to prove that he belongs in the NFL, and he just needs to kick it. He can do that and be a 3rd-round pick and make a lot of money.
3rd-round pick for a punter. That's good living right there.
I would think so. I was not a 3rd-round pick, but I had a little bit of success, so it's been nice.
What round was Bosher? Is he a 5?
Matt Bosher, I believe, was a 5th or a 6th round pick, and he is a stud for your Atlanta Falcons.
Yes,
there's no doubt.
Turned into a pretty nice career. Guys, Texas Pete scoreboard show. Sorry about that. I got messages coming in so fast I can't keep up with them. But a guy says, do not forget to mention the injury to Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley goes out of this game. He's a guy who doesn't sit out any plays. What's your level of concern as an Alabama fan, assuming that maybe he does have to miss some time when you got some guys that are pretty green as far as playmakers out there in the skill position?
Yeah, Calvin Ridley, not only is he a big play threat for Alabama, but he's sort of that security blanket for a player like Jalen Hurts. So hopefully Calvin Ridley not hurt. I'm sure Nick Saban and Brian DeBall, their new offensive coordinators, hoping that he can get back soon, especially because they've got some big games coming up. I mean, obviously Auburn late in the season will be a huge test in the Iron Bowl, but LSU and Tennessee, I guess, is a big rivalry game, but I'll be interested to see what that point spread is.
Right. You mentioned LSU. This is a Texas Pete scoreboard show. Don't forget, guys, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. So LSU on the road yesterday, taking on Florida, and turned out to be a heck of a football game. Kind of what we expected, a low-scoring game. Before we get into this, you see all the stuff there. I want to mention something from a gambling perspective. And this is not a gambling show, but I've never seen anything like this in my life. The line for this game opened up at Florida minus 2.5, okay? Before 48 hours later, it was up to Florida minus 6, okay? At kickoff, it was LSU minus 1. By the way, LSU wins by 1, so it pushes. I've never seen anything like that. A line move 8.5 points in 48 hours, and nobody got hurt. No weather.
Yeah. The suits in Vegas are very, very, very good at their job, and those casinos are extremely nice when you go out there. So you wonder why. These people are extremely good handicappers. I've never seen a line like that move either. I mean, I saw Florida giving 3 points earlier in the week. They closed as a 1.5-point underdog. LSU wins by a point. Mind-boggling, but that's gambling in college football.
So you got to give Ed Orgeron and LSU a little bit of credit here. I mean, this is a team routed by Mississippi State, embarrassed in front of everybody. How do you respond to that? Well, we got Troy coming down to Baton Rouge next week. Night game. We don't lose night games in Baton Rouge to, smaller opponents. They're down 24-7 in the fourth quarter to Troy. And all of a sudden it's looking like not only did you make the wrong hire, but you brought in a guy who's running this different kind of offense that doesn't really seem to be transferring to SEC style of play. Oh, by the way, you're going on the road to play in the Swamp next week. It's going to be a physical test. It's a big rivalry. And you find a way to win the football game. So this was really, I don't want to say an indictment, but this is a great accomplishment for Ed Orgeron to get this thing turned around and find a way to get it win.
Yeah, a great accomplishment for Ed Orgeron. He's been a head coach in the SEC for plenty of years in the past, and this was his first road victory in the SEC as a head coach. So a lot of props to Coach Orgeron. A big-time win for LSU to come back after a disappointing loss a week ago at home to Troy. But again, we say it and we say it and we say it. Much like in the NFL, it's hard to win football games. That relates to the SEC. It's hard to win football games in the SEC. You've got to bring it every single week. And kudos to LSU because they brought it yesterday and got a huge victory in the Swamp.
Yeah, and nobody's going to make excuses for Florida. I mean, especially Jim McElwain, obviously disappointed. They had an opportunity to win the football game. Special teams miscue there. Funky snap, didn't really have it set. Missed extra point, would have tied the game in the fourth quarter at 17, but you lost the game.
Yep.
And offensively, this is a team. We know about the injury at quarterback. We know about the suspension. A lot of young guys are getting some playing time for them, and they're getting better, Davis and Tony, but they just don't have the bodies, Drew. It seems like as the game goes on, they just don't have answers at the playmaking positions.
Yeah, it's tough. McElwain's luck kind of ran out yesterday. Now, that miscue on special teams, I thought the snap was all right. Townsend gets the ball down, tries to spin it 180 degrees, and it fell out of his hands. Pinheiro literally kicked the ball as it was falling, a dastardly mistake for the special teams, and that's what it proved to be the difference. You lose by 1 point because of a special teams miscue, and you go back to Florida just not having the bodies, it seems like, in years past to be able to exploit defenses, make big-time plays, kind of just convert third downs and run out the clock. They've got some issues down in Gainesville, and I said it yesterday, as a Georgia fan and alumni, I'm excited for Jacksonville. I think this is a tasty setup for this Georgia defense to play against Jim McElwain's offense that is sputtering, to say the least.
What did you see out of Franks yesterday? To me, it seems like the playbook is so dialed back when he's in there. And McElwain, he's got a great feel for his quarterback.
Yeah.
So there very well might be a reason why it is the way it is. But Florida fans, they are very upset about the play calling. It seems like anything downfield, anything that's not very simple for this guy to handle, they're not even trying anything different. At some point, you got to mix it up a little bit. You got to turn over the apple cart, don't you?
Yeah, you got to take the reins off of him, especially the way that they've begun this season. You know, it's been a carousel for it. If you play bad, you're going to get taken out. Now, Del Rio kind of planted himself as the starter. Then he got hurt. Franks comes in. I feel like he's playing not to make mistakes, Hans. And Malik Zaire, I mean, he's on the sideline. Franks is out there not being able to make great plays, probably thinking, man, I'm about to get taken out of the game. He didn't, but you said it. It's very elementary offensive play calling. It seems like it's either a run play, something short, or just chuck it deep. I mean, and Florida's not able to get any sort of consistency on the offensive side of the ball, and it's hurting them.
A couple guys writing in here into our Texas Pete scoreboard show saying Florida should be 0-6. You can make an argument that Florida very well could have lost every game that they've played this year. That's a very good point. One thing I want to talk to you about, Drew, me personally, I don't like LSU's offense.
No.
I don't like, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's like a high school offense. Yeah. And whether I like it or not doesn't matter. The question is, can it be successful? Can it be sustainable in the Southeastern Conference? My question is, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, who in the world in high school at the skill level position that's not a running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback is going to want to come play in that system?
Yeah, Matt Canada got a lot of praise heading into the season about being LSU's new offensive coordinator. LSU's going to reinvent the wheel on offense. And good coaches do one thing, Hans. They adjust to the players that they have. They don't ask the players to adjust to their schemes. It seems like Matt Canada has not grasped this concept yet. You are at LSU. You have 4- and 5-star athletes literally falling off trees. Look at the players that you have. Understand the quarterback that you have and adjust your coaching style to fit your players the best. And it's hurting LSU big time. You have a Heisman-like player in Darius Geis. Make the offense revolve around him. Get him the ball, put him into space. It's tough to watch. It really is tough to watch.
I don't think, and they alluded to it yesterday on the broadcast on CBS. Nessler brought it up a couple times. He doesn't look right. He doesn't look anything like the player he was last year, and so maybe that has a lot to do with some of their offensive struggles. But hey, if you're an LSU Tiger fan, guess what? You know, you got a big win. You've won 10 out of the last 16 against Florida, which is always going to be a tough game. And you're headed home next week. You're taking on an Auburn Tiger team, and we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a bit. That's going to be, without question, their biggest test of the season. And we'll see what's going on with Ed Orgeron and see if they can build off this win and maybe get a little roll going.
Yeah, that'd be nice for LSU. They need it, and it's a long season. You mentioned it. We're only in week 6. If LSU can right the ship like they began to yesterday, put the train back on the tracks, it'll be really interesting to see how the SEC West plays out. I believe at this point in time, LSU controls their own destiny to the SEC championship game, so mind blown.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is amazing. You know what? We'll talk a little bit more about that because it's time to really get in the SEC East, the West, and how this all could shake down. A guy just hit us up on our Facebook Live page. He says, mark my words, Auburn is going to play Georgia twice, and they're both going to split, and we're going to be in one heck of a mess.
Hot take.
Right. That's a hot take, and it's very possible.
I
so
like it.
Here's the one thing I learned about covering college football is that you cannot make any proclamations at halftime of the national championship game, much less at week 6.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea. These are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids from week to week, and how you keep them motivated and focused, you got to talk to Nick Saban about that because he's the only guy that really understands.
Yeah, it's a grind. And, you know, if you're good, the season just gets longer. So these guys have got to figure out to take it week by week. It's cliche, but hey, one game at a time, 1 week at a time. And I like a moniker that Kirby Smart's been using. Humility is a week away. There's no doubt about that.
That's a great one. And, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's our transition here. That's to Kirby Smart and University of Georgia. And Nick Saban, I said, you know, he's the only guy that's been able to figure this out. we're starting to see Kirby Smart's identity as a head football coach, the brand that he's building at the University of Georgia. Of course, a guy who played there, a very fiery coach, a defensive-minded coach. And last year, they lost a couple close games. They had a true freshman at quarterback. They had a porous offensive line. This year, you get some experience back on defense. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of Michelle and Chubb coming back. Not just, Drew, and you can talk about this, leadership in the locker room, not just what we're seeing on the field, but all these young players, your Swifts, whomever, that see these two seniors bringing it every single day to practice in the classroom, on the field, in the locker room. How important is that going to be, not only for this year, but for these young guys moving forward to help Kirby Smart build this identity for Georgia football?
Yeah, there's no question. I think the biggest thing for this Georgia football team is the experience that they got a year ago with this new coaching staff, right? There's been a culture change in Athens. I mean, that's obvious. Now, I understand Georgia fan base, and they're usually pretty pessimistic, and for a good reason. I mean, I have people tell me I'm pessimistic because of what teams like yours did. And I said, that's a good reason. We did not do much through 2007 to 2014, 2011, in ways of winning championships. Now, there were very good years. 2012, SEC championship game. You should have gone to the national championship. There's no doubt about it. But there is a culture change in Athens. The experience that this team got a year ago, losing games that they should not have lost, having bad second halves, not being able to dominate the run game like they should. This team's hungry. They're bringing it every single week. The offensive line has been vastly improved, and this defense is fun to watch. That's the reason why Georgia is 6-0. Defense, special teams, and then, hey, guess what? You've got an absolute stable of running backs. That's just icing on the cake.
Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete's. This is Texas Pete's Scoreboard Show. Hans Heiser alongside Drew Butler. Stuff coming in on the on our Facebook page here. Georgia, hands down, the best defense in the country. Hey, slow your roll. You're in the conversation. Auburn's got something to say about that. Alabama's got something to say about that. There's a couple Big Ten schools bringing it this year as well. But defensively, I mean, they were without two starters yesterday, arguably their best player up front, and they struggled a little bit first half, especially on third down. But defensively, I mean, when there's a guy in the other team that catches the football, the pursuit to the football, it's the only thing I've ever seen like it in recent memory is Alabama. You can really see the identity and where he got this from, being Kirby Smart. Yeah,
there's no question. It's fun to watch in a game like yesterday. Those white jerseys just swarm around whoever has the ball. And when you have a linebacking core like Georgia has with Davin Bellamy, Roquan Smith in the middle, and Lorenzo Carter, you're going to win a lot of football games because they cover space so well, and they can absolutely fire off the edge and get to the quarterback. So it's going to be fun to watch. They did get hurt yesterday early in the first quarter with the absence of Natrez Patrick and Trenton Thompson and Reggie Carter. But if they get healthy as they should, with Missouri coming up and then a bye week, Georgia has a lot to be said for the second half of the season. There's no question.
Lorenzo Carter, one of Mark Richt's biggest recruits, his first couple years really didn't contribute much on the field, had all the physical attributes. You got to figure he's going to be in the National Football League. This year, obviously making plays, but the other thing that I noticed for him, him and the linebacker, Roquan, they are the leaders, man. I mean, without question. And I don't know that I would ever imagine Lorenzo Carter being a leader, but I saw a couple times yesterday where there was a little pushing and shoving after the play, maybe a chance for an official to throw a flag. He's over there breaking it up. That's the kind of stuff you want to see from the leaders and the seniors on your football team.
Yeah, that's smart football. That's accountable football, and that's what equates to winning games. So it's good to see. And I think that comes from the top down, Hans. I mean, Kirby Smart's telling his good playmakers, don't be an idiot, right? Don't get stupid penalties that are going to put us behind the chains. Make plays, get off the field. And that's what Georgia's done so far.
Yeah, Georgia impressive again. We got to talk about the quarterback situation. I feel like every week there's more to talk about. Another another piece of the cookie, if you will. I thought yesterday he wasn't asked to do a lot, nor has he ever had the nice play action pass there to start the second half for the big touchdown. You did get to see a little bit of Eason there towards the end. He fumbles. And, of course, Vanderbilt goes on to score the touchdown there. Not an indictment on the defense at all. But Justin Fields, arguably one of the top quarterbacks in the nation, if not the top, five-star earlier in the week, commits to the University of Georgia. You got Fromm, who's a true freshman, and now you got Eason. Yeah. And you can kind of see it in his face a little bit. That his body language, that He's not in the right place, and that's got to be tough for a kid who's on the other side of the country, away from his home, and just he's up against a lot of adversity right now.
It is tough, and you do feel bad for Jacob Eason in the situation that he's been in. Sure, he won the job in preseason camp, right? He beat out Jake Fromm to be the starting quarterback at Georgia. Now, things happen.
Good point.
This is football, right? You have a knee sprain. Next man up, Jake Fromm is 6-0. Okay, you get in yesterday. Unfortunately, they give a corner blitz. You don't see it off your backside, sack fumble. I would imagine Kirby Smart apologized to Jacob Eason, and I would imagine he did it in front of the entire team. There's no question. But my one plea to Jacob Eason, don't transfer. You came to Georgia to go to the NFL. Why would you sit out a year to prove that you can play quarterback? Everybody knows you can play quarterback. Hey, relax. Be the best teammate possible. Practice hard when NFL scouts are at practice. Go to the NFL after next year. 3 years and out at Georgia. That was your original plan.
If you're Vanderbilt, you start out 3-0, but then you get into the SEC. Reality sets in. Alabama, Florida, Georgia. They can't stop the run. They showed the statistic up there earlier when we showed the score. I think they've been outrushed like 1,200 yards to 160 over the last 3 weeks. They cannot stop anybody on run. And when you talk about Coach Mason, how is he keeping his team focused and positive after the beatdowns that they've taken the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's tough to keep morale high when you're just getting your teeth kicked in week after week, but these are dominant championship-level football teams you're playing against, and simply put, Vanderbilt used to be able to hang with teams because they were solid on the offensive and defensive lines. It's not that way in 2017 for the Commodores, so it's going to continue to be a long season if they cannot protect the quarterback, run the ball, or stop the run.
Moving along, another big game yesterday. Auburn. I watched the first half of this game. I taped it because it was on the same time as the Georgia game, and I wanted to be able to see this Auburn offense and how they have progressed since the game against Clemson. Stidham was incredible again yesterday. He made some throws that, quite frankly, early on in the year, I don't know that he had I don't want to say the ability to make, but the confidence to make. He is a confident quarterback right now, and if you're a defense in the SEC West, you throw that running game on top of him, Kerryon Johnson, over 203 more touchdowns yesterday. Auburn looking as good as ever. 35-3 at halftime. And the other thing on this side is Ole Miss, man. How do you keep these kids involved and motivated when you're playing for nothing? You see the same thing in Baylor right now. They're 0-5. But Auburn going one way, Ole Miss going the other one. But the storyline for me was Stidham as he continues to impress.
Yes, Stidham does impress, and it's been proven that if you affect him in the pocket, he can make some bad plays. Nobody's gotten that kind of pressure on him like Clemson did in the game that they lost. So there is a recipe to beat this team. But if Stidham's not having a good day, yeah, just continue to hand the ball off to a guy like Kerryon Johnson, and then you have Cameron Petway to supplement that. Auburn looks really good. Their offense does, but guess what? Their defense is full of studs as well. Their front seven on defense is why they will be a factor late in the season. They've got two huge games, Georgia and Alabama. And unfortunately for the SEC, when the realignment happened, they made these two games for Auburn both either away or home in the same season. That kind of stinks for Auburn fans. Usually you like to go to Athens and then come back to the Plains for the Alabama game. Now they travel 2 weeks in a row. Unfortunately, that's just a little personal feeling for mine. It stinks that they have to have those games back-to-back, either both home or both away.
Guy Johnson on our Facebook page with maybe the line of the day right now. He says, Ole Miss changing their mascot to the Land Shark, somewhat appropriate since they are fictional characters. They don't exist.
Yeah. Can I mention one more thing? We've been talking about gambling. This line closed that Auburn is a 21-point favorite, okay? Right. They won by 21 points. Ole Miss scored late in the game. There was about 2 minutes left. Mm-hmm. Instead of kicking an extra point and going down by 20, they went for 2 and missed it. And the game pushed. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Scott Van Pelt will do something on that. He does a good job with that.
I don't understand.
I think they had 174 yards of total offense going into the fourth quarter. It was trash time.
Yeah.
It was complete trash time. I mean, Auburn, again, completely dismantling their opponent. Kerryon Johnson, what can you say about this guy? I mean, the last 3 weeks, 11 touchdowns rushing, career high over 200. But here's the thing yesterday. You look at career high 28 carries. Now, you mentioned no Petway, but still, that's a lot of carries for a guy who you're going to lean on down the stretch. I imagine when Petway comes back, they'll balance that out a little bit. But, hey, that's a nice problem to have if you're Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, there's no question. And this is the Gus Malzahn offense that people are used to, right? I mean, it was sputtered early in the season, but they're certainly catching their stride right now. And these running backs, I mean, yesterday, Kerryon Johnson, he was running without even getting touched. There were no bodies around him. So hopefully when they get a few more, and you'll see it this weekend against LSU, I don't think it'll be as easy sledding as it was this past week against Ole Miss. But Gus Malzahn, the Gus bus is rolling ahead, that's for sure.
Now, you look at Ole Miss the last 3 weeks, Alabama, Auburn, and then again yesterday, they've been outscored 110-26. Well, yeah, but they do have, I don't want to say, they do have some nice talented players on that team. This is a team that is completely lost.
Yeah.
They are without leadership on and off the field, it appears. And it's tough to watch. It really is tough to watch.
Yeah, it's hard, I mean, with everything that happened just a few weeks before the season started, Matt Luke is not a head coach. It's unfortunate.
He's in an impossible position.
He's in an impossible position. He's an Ole Miss lifer. He's given everything to the university, and now he's being handed this platter of you-know-what, and it's a bit unfortunate the situation that he's in. I do not see the light getting any brighter for Ole Miss in the near future. It's tough, and I feel bad for the student athletes that are there for the position that they've been put in.
Yeah, Auburn, tough test coming up next week on the road down in Baton Rouge. We'll preview that a little bit later on in the show. You are watching the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Texas Pete, more drama for your mouth. Moving along yesterday, a surprising outpour of points by the South Carolina Gamecocks. Taking care of Arkansas. And there's so many different ways to look at this football game. I thought that this was an elimination game for the season for both of these teams.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just felt like the loser of this game potentially the season had a chance to get away from them. I think the biggest storyline here, other than South Carolina finding a way to get the win, if you're Arkansas, Cole Kelly comes in the fourth quarter. Arkansas's offense was terrible in this football game. And credit South Carolina's defense, but maybe a change at quarterback, maybe a little optimism going into the future. Is that enough for Arkansas faithful to have a little bit of faith in Brett Bielema, or does it just seem like this is just getting away from it?
I don't want to have an overreaction Sunday, but Brett Bielema, I feel like time may be running out in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It's tough to see that offense and kind of the dumpster fire that is Arkansas football right now, especially when they turn the ball over like they did. You're not going to win football games when you give up 3 defensive touchdowns, non-offensive touchdowns, to South Carolina like they did yesterday. When you only scored 22 and then you give up 21 points to the defense, that's a quick recipe for a loss right there.
Now, I want to talk about South Carolina, how well they played, but one thing I do want to mention while we're talking about Bielema and Arkansas, I think when a coach gets a short leash, I think it's for a couple reasons. One of the things is if you're a specialist, if you have an identity, like Will Muschamp is a defensive guy, right? Yep. Their defense is playing well. They had 3 defensive touchdowns in the game yesterday. So you're saying, okay, at least he can do what he does well. Okay, what is Brett Bielema known for? Offensive line, owning time of possession and running the football. They can't do that. And then you throw a defense that can't stop anybody on top of that, and this thing is just going downhill fast, not to mention, oh, by the way, you play in the SEC West.
There's a reason why Brett Bielema wanted to hang on to Sam Pittman as long as he could. Sam Pittman is now the offensive line coach at Georgia. Georgia has had a tremendous improvement on their offensive line, and Arkansas's offensive line has gone downhill tremendously as well. So 2 different directions right there, and Brett Bielema is feeling the brunt of it. There's no question.
Guy just wrote in. He says, it's from Stephen Pirtle. He says he's only got a $15 million buyout from Arkansas. That's it.
You know how to coach? I
don't think I'd want that job.
For $15 million?
No, I'm saying the expectations there are somewhat unrealistic. Yeah. I mean, Bobby Petrino, he had a cook in there, but it's to the exact point. What does Bobby Petrino do well? Yeah. He puts up points. He has great quarterback play, and that's what they did. So Brett Bielema, who was going to come down here, establish an identity in the SEC that Wisconsin style football would work down here, he hasn't even been able to get started to even try to prove if it could potentially work.
So a question for me on that would be, you just mentioned you don't know if you'd want that job. If Arkansas does in fact pay the $15 million to buy out Brett Bielema's contract, could they recruit someone like a Mike Bobo? Right. To be the head coach of Arkansas. Now, Coach Bobo would have to come to the SEC West. Coach Bobo would have to play against Nick Saban every year. Coach Bobo would have to play against LSU, Auburn every year. I don't know if you want that job.
Right.
Where are you going to recruit? You got to go into Texas. Arkansas is not very fertile ground, but I don't know. You just mentioned it. It's a tough job to say you would want to have.
$15 million. Jerry Jones has got that in his couch, so maybe they can find a way to figure that out. Jake Bentley, on the other hand, yesterday, we'll talk a little bit about the South Carolina defense in a sec. I thought it was his best game. I thought it was his best game as a Gamecock quarterback. He made some throws, some secondary throws, meaning they throwing over linebackers into levels of coverage, throws that great quarterbacks have to make. And I don't want to say he's a great quarterback, but he made 3 or 4 throws that I saw. I went back and watched the first half this morning that I said, wait a second. This guy's legit. I mean, he can really make some throws here. I know he's not his biggest playmaker, but if you're South Carolina, the defense is playing the way it's playing, you get some better play out of him. You got to be feeling pretty good today.
Yeah, Jake Bentley, 3 touchdown passes, and he completed passes to 9 different receivers. Look, he can make all the throws. He's proven that time and again. But I love the way he can extend plays with his feet. He is an athlete. He's got a rocket arm to boot. This kid is special, and he's so young. It's really unbelievable how young he is and how well he has been performing. It'll be interesting to see how he can perform against big-time defenses. I think that'll be his biggest test.
Yeah, Arkansas definitely not known as a big-time defense, not just yet. So big win for Will Muschamp yesterday, and tough loss for Arkansas. Moving along, Texas Pete's scoreboard, and what turned out to be probably the most exciting game of the day, the final part of the triple-header on the SEC Network last night, and that was Missouri on the road taking on Kentucky. Kentucky walks away with the victory. They're 5-1. But Missouri, to me, they surprised me a little bit yesterday. This is like a team that was left for dead. Now, I'm not trying to turn Kentucky into Alabama here by any stretch of the imagination, but Missouri competed in this game, had the ball on the final drive, down a position, had a chance to win the football game, came up a little bit short, but, you know, they're not a team that looks like they're going to lay down the rest of the year. That's good to see if you're a Missouri fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Mark Stoops has been doing pretty well for Kentucky. Are they 5-1 now? Did I just see that?
Should be 6-0.
They should be 6-0. So Missouri obviously takes them to the limit, loses a one-possession game. Tough sledding out in Columbia, Missouri this season. They're overmatched. That offense is supposed to be pretty explosive, and they were yesterday. 3 touchdowns of over 50-plus yards. But Missouri heading to Athens next week, I don't think it's going to get any better for the Tigers this season.
Yeah, Kentucky lost 3 starters on defense last night. They're going to a bye week. Coach Stoops said after the game that it couldn't come at a better time. You talk about a time to rest your players, kind of evaluate the first half of the season, look at it and say, hey, look, we're 5-1. Okay, we control our own destiny, believe it or not. We got a lot to play for, and he's really done a great job of building a brand and what we all know is a basketball school without question. Always will be a basketball school. But my question to you is Mark Stoops a guy who other teams are going to come looking for as a head coach because he's been able to turn around in Kentucky? Or is he a guy that says, you know what, I like it here in Lexington. I think I might stick around here for a while. It could go either way.
It could go either way. You know, my first question would be what schools, right? So where would Mark Stoops go from Kentucky? Because he's got a pretty cush gig right now. I think he's comfortable being little brother to basketball, which is not a bad thing at a dominant powerhouse school like Kentucky. But Mark Stoops has proven that he can win football games. Now, again, it might be an overreaction. We're only in week 6. They are 5-1, but they have some tougher games down the stretch here the rest of the season. I'll be really interested to see where Kentucky finishes and check back on them in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, Drew Lock yesterday in the loss played very well. I think they were able to run the football, something they haven't been able to do at all this year. Really helped him out. He throws a great football.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, they're going to be in Athens next week taking on the Georgia Bulldogs. Without question, the toughest defense they faced all year. He might throw it 65 times in that game.
They're going to need to, and it'll be really interesting to see how Georgia reacts to that. The first time they've truly been spread out this season. Georgia's secondary has played extremely well, but guess what? With that front 4 and those linebackers coming off the edge, affect Drew Lock, get up in his grill, force some turnovers. It should get ugly in Athens.
Man, everybody on our Facebook page just wants to talk Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, Auburn. And that seems to be where it's headed right now. So let's go ahead and take a look. It's also that they're going to have to beat Georgia.
Yeah.
So Georgia really in the driver's seat right now. You see the standings right there. Kentucky still control. And South Carolina's not going to be an easy out for anybody.
No. You know, that November 4th game for Georgia and South Carolina could be huge because I expect Georgia to dominate Florida this year. I know that might be a scorching hot take for some Georgia fans to hear.
You got a dog in the fight?
I do have a dog in the fight, but for good reason. Florida, not a very good football team this year. I mean, they could be 0-6, like one of our Facebook commenters pointed out to us. Now, Georgia should be able to handle that game well in Jacksonville. And guess what? That's just the way the cookies crumbled this year in the SEC East. The SEC East has had trouble in years past recently, but Georgia has not been at the top. Guess what? Beat the teams you're supposed to beat and represent the East in the SEC championship game. You mentioned it, though. That South Carolina game, November 4th, yeah. I'm glad it's in Athens because that will be a knockdown drag-out amongst Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp.
Yeah, and you're looking at 4 bowl teams right there coming out of the East. And if you're Kentucky and if you're a rebuilding South Carolina program after what happened with Spurrier walking away, those are 2 teams that are clearly pointed in the right direction. Georgia pointed in the right direction. You got some serious questions down there at the bottom with Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Tennessee. Florida, who knows? It's hard to really for me to get a fair assessment on Florida this year because of the suspensions, because of the quarterback situation, the injury there. But you know they're going to have talent. I just want to see him kind of, open up the playbook a little bit, and I want to see if this kid can play.
Yeah, I mean, just give take the reins off Felipe Franks. Tell him he's your quarterback moving forward. Allow him to have the peace of mind that if he makes a mistake, he's not going to get yanked and you're going to throw Malik Zaire in there. I think Jim McElwain made a big mistake early this year by having the carousel start early. They should have told Felipe Franks, you're our guy. Go do your thing, okay? Then you can get into a rhythm. Then you can have conversations with the offensive coordinator and say, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, let's run these plays, let's stay away from these plays. They don't have that luxury in Gainesville right now, and it's showing.
Sean Witt says Chip Kelly's going to have his pick of which SEC school that he wants to go to.
I don't know. We'll see. Does Chip Kelly want to come to the SEC?
Right.
It'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I would think as a coach who he's already shown he wants to compete at the highest level. Yeah. He wanted to go to the NFL, give it a shot. I think if you're a competitor, and he's still a young guy, I mean, he's not, towards the end of his career by any stretch of the imagination. I think as a competitor, you want to be in the SEC.
For sure. My only thing to Chip Kelly would be, what school are you going to go to? I would be terrified to see him at one school, Hans, and that's Florida, because he would dominate recruiting with those athletes and his scheme. It would be tough sled, not only for Georgia, but for the entire SEC. So
right.
I think Chip Kelly's waiting. Why rush into it? Why go to a Tennessee, right?
Wait for the perfect opportunity.
Wait for the perfect opportunity, and we'll see what happens.
In the SEC West, of course, Alabama, they're at the top right now, tied with Auburn, both sitting there at 3-0. Everybody's got this game circled, the Iron Bowl, but don't forget, Auburn still got to play Georgia before this. You got the LSU-Alabama game. I mean, who knows what happens with that? I know people are laughing at that, but I mean, there's a lot of football left to be played, and you get the same thing in the East as you do at the West. You got some bad teams down at the bottom, and you got some teams kind of bundled in the middle that are going to be fighting for some respectable bowl berths.
Yeah, absolutely. The SEC West has been dominant in years past, but you mentioned it, Hans. The entire conference is really a 3-team race right now between Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. But the SEC West is going to start beating up on each other real soon here. Auburn heading to LSU this weekend down in Red Stick, Louisiana, and then obviously Alabama still has to play LSU and then the Iron Bowl after Thanksgiving. This scoreboard West standings will look significantly different in just a few weeks, so we're just getting started, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll take a look at some big games coming up next week. Just want to ask you a couple questions, Drew. What SEC programs do you see at the end of the season? Now, right now, if you had to speculate today, that will make a change at head coach. And throwing the buyouts into play here, there's a lot of other things as far as who's available. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I mean, I got to think Missouri's going to make a change, most certainly.
I would think Missouri. Obviously, it seems like Tennessee's heading in that direction as well. And Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss is going to have a big-time coaching search out there, unfortunately, for Matt Luke, who's the interim head coach. I don't think that he had much of a chance for success to prove that he could be the head coach there, but I think 3 locks in Week 6 would be Missouri, Tennessee, and Ole Miss.
Yeah. That's good. And a couple on the bubble there. I think Kevin Sumlin's done enough to save his job.
I think so, too.
We talked about the buyout at Arkansas with Bielema, but this thing seems to be getting away from him pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's tough, but that money, I mean, money talks. And
right.
$15 million, a lot of boosters are going to be calling into the Athletic Association saying, let's just hang on a second, because that same Athletic Association that's going to make the call to fire Brett Bielema will be calling those boosters again saying, hey, we're going to go search for a new coach. Guess what that takes? Right. Money.
And you could get these Arkansas fans, like the first play of scrimmage yesterday, they run one up the middle, they get 1 yard. Boo! I mean, they've had it, man. It's got to be frustrating as a player. It's got to be frustrating as a coach. But still, you know, they got games left on their schedule. Maybe they win a few, and I hope it all works out for Coach Bielema. You are watching our Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Let's see, what do we got? Game balls? You want to do a little offensive, defensive game balls?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, man. Who you got? Offensive game ball yesterday in the Southeastern Conference.
All right, in the Southeastern Conference, I'm going to give some collective game balls out, but
like
for the Southeastern Conference, yes, that is. Georgia's offensive line, all right? Call me a homer,
right.
Say whatever you want. Georgia's offensive line, you can make the case that they are the most improved unit in college football from a year ago. The dominating run game that they had, granted it was against Vanderbilt, is great to see. That's how you win football games. They didn't even have to pass the ball at all yesterday to walk out with a dominating win. So, Sam Pittman, kudos to you. You've got your players playing fantastic football, and this offensive line is gelling at the right time.
Yeah, that's a great call, man. They were 15 yards downfield on just about every play, averaged 9.5 yards per play.
Yeah.
Per play, and a lot of these were on first down.
Yeah.
So you're Vanderbilt, you're sitting at second and a foot. That's not going to win.
That's fun football.
That's fun football.
Team. Yeah.
Hey, if you were, if you were still with Georgia, you would not have to do your job very much.
Put me at running back if I'm still at Georgia. These guys have wide open holes to run. I'm not the fastest guy, but I think I could get 1 yard behind that line.
I'm going Kerryon Johnson yesterday, and that's just easy, man. 3 touchdowns, over 200 yards, career high 28 carries. The Auburn offense continues to roll, man. Stidham's making plays, but Kerryon Johnson, Petway was supposed to be the guy. Johnson doing an outstanding job. 11 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. I mean, these are video game numbers.
Yeah, it's crazy. Obviously, he had a fantastic game yesterday. That Auburn offense is finding their groove, certainly, and it'll be really interesting to see how it develops throughout the season. But before we go to a defensive game ball,
we have to talk about
I've got
this.
to cross conference lines real quick. I've been living in Arizona for 3.5 years, and I have to give some credit to U of A. Arizona Wildcats backup quarterback Khalil Tate yesterday had 327 yards rushing on 14 carries. That's 23 yards a rush, a long of 75 yards and 4 touchdowns. A backup quarterback.
I saw that go across the thing, right? And I said, I just looked at it twice, and that's not right.
Yeah,
I said that's not right.
It's a typo.
Right, that's a typo.
Late nights in Bristol.
327 yards rushing.
Unheard of.
You can't do it.
Video game numbers.
You can't do it.
No.
You
can't do it on a video game.
You can't do it. I mean, it's unbelievable. So hats off to him.
Absolutely.
Defensive player of the week, defensive game ball?
I'm giving the collective game balls out, so I got to make a phone call to Nike or Wilson. It's going to be a big order this week. But South Carolina's defense, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions returns for a touchdown, 1 fumble return for a touchdown. Will Muschamp has that defensive mentality. They could have won the game on their own yesterday. South Carolina's defense, you get game balls.
Yeah, that's why Cole Kelly came in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
Yeah, Bielema had seen enough. The 4 turnovers yesterday for Arkansas. You're not going to win the SEC on the road with that. I'm going Minkah Fitzpatrick for Alabama. The safety yesterday iced the game. Texas A&M had a chance to tie it up there later, make it a 1-possession game. He completely okey-doked Mond into making that throw as if he wasn't there. He goes in, he gets the interception, seals the deal. And then if just a little icing on the cake, special teams, he's on with the hands team. They try to kick an onside kick, which at that point they needed the onside kick, the recovery, the touchdown, the Hail Mary, the 2-point conversion. But he had the wherewithal to pick up the ball, scoop it up, and just about took it to the house for a touchdown. He's the leader of that defense. He's an outstanding football player.
Yeah, it's cool to see. Minkah Fitzpatrick is my favorite player in college football.
Really?
I've said that again and again. This kid is a certified stud, a playmaker, and I just love the way he plays football. You just said it. When he caught that onside kick yesterday with barely any time left, he didn't take a knee. Man, he ran, tried to score a touchdown. And if he was going to take any crap from Nick Saban, he looked right at him in the face and said, I'm the defensive leader. I make the calls.
All right, let's take a look at next week's game, Week 7 in the Southeastern Conference, and obviously the big one, Auburn with their first true test since their opener against Clemson. They're on the road down in Baton Rouge. They have not announced a time for that game yet, I believe, at least as of last night late. They have not. You have to expect that's going to be under the lights. And what's your initial take on that one?
It's going to be tough. I mean, Auburn, the way they're playing defense right now, and as bad as LSU's offense has been week in and week out, you got to think Auburn should have an advantage. I'll be really interested to see what the suits in Vegas think because they're usually pretty correct. I would think Auburn probably, I don't know, like a 6-point favorite heading into this game. They score so many points and the defense has played so well. I just feel like it's a bad matchup for LSU.
Yeah, I agree. I think that athletically, defensively, the athletes that Auburn has, all that rinky-dink, stuff, decoy stuff, if they stay disciplined and stay in their lanes, they're going to shut that out.
Yeah.
Edling's going to have to make some throws.
Yeah, and he hasn't proven that he can do that. And unfortunately, his offensive coordinator hasn't allowed him to be in very successful positions for a setup for success. So I would expect, and again, I just think this is a bad matchup for LSU. And we'll see what they're saying about Coach O next week after they lose to Auburn.
A couple other interesting games there. You got A&M on the road against Florida.
Yeah.
A&M, a team that's going the right direction. How does Florida respond? Do they open up the playbook? They got to find a way to score some more points, no question.
Yeah, they've got to find a way. And obviously, after this week, Florida will have a bye week, so they're going to go all chips in. They cannot afford to lose this game going into the bye week with Georgia a couple weeks away. But I think this is a very interesting game. Kevin Sumlin playing against the Florida Gators in Gainesville. That'll be a fun game to watch. I'll be interested to see what time slot that game gets as well. I'm not sure if it's been announced yet.
Yeah, in South Carolina on the road at Tennessee. Tennessee, after a week off, how did they respond? South Carolina's going to be feeling pretty good about themselves. That's an interesting game as well.
I think that might be the best game of the weekend. That could be a game that comes down to the fourth quarter, potential overtime type game. I feel like those teams are very well matched up against each other, and Tennessee, time and again, it seems like these guys will not quit on Butch Jones. Georgia made them quit a week ago, but it'll be a fun game to watch. I feel like, and this is my call, a week from Saturday, that'll be the best, most interesting game of the weekend.
Looking forward to that one. And if you're Brett Bielema, just what you wanted, just what the doctor ordered, man. You're on the hot seat, going into Tuscaloosa, #1 team in the country. You got it, man. Just stick to what you're doing. Cole Kelly might be the starting quarterback. He might not be. But interesting week ahead as we get more and more into this college football season. Things starting to take form. This has been the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show for Drew Butler. Drew's been a lot of fun, man.
Thanks, Hans.
Enjoyed it. Hope to have you back soon. And to everybody behind the glass, Mark, Mike, Nate, great job as always. To all you guys hitting us up on our Facebook Live page, share it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.